Anime. It's a wondrous world full of many different varieties and genres and everything, all taking you to a brand new world that exists outside our own. But very few of them have ever crossed over into each other's. Weirdly enough, the first one that comes to mind in terms of anime crossovers is Orimo and Eromanga Sensei. I mean, even though it's not necessarily crossover, it's just like they take place in the same universe. Like, we'll never get the iCarly victorious crossover for anime. But either way, all of that to say, this is a new series that I'm going to be starting called Anime Cross Battles. Now, what exactly does that mean? Let me explain it to you. At the end of the day, I'm a pretty big shonen boy. I'm a big action fan. I love, big fights, well choreographed action, animated, amazing shit. And I have a lot of favorite characters from these said action shows, where when I look at them, I tend to think about maybe another character, just like, oh, I wonder what it would be like if these two characters crossed over and maybe battled each other. Now, this isn't gonna be like your stereotypical, like your death battle kind of thing. For one, I'm keeping it strictly to anime for now, and I'm making it where it's crossovers that you never really would have ever thought of. I've made a whole fucking list of these. The main one that kicked it off was this one that we're going to be delving into today, that being Kiritsugu Emiya from Fate Zero versus Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. For a basic thing, we're pretty much gonna go with like a slow breakdown. We'll start with one character and sort of just break down the show that they were in, the role they played in the plot, their overall abilities, their good traits, and just what makes them just who they are in the show that they're in. Now, with all that out of the way, I say let's get right to the breakdowns. First of all, I think we will start with Kiritsugu Emiya from Fate Zero. Now, I know there's a little bit of obvious bias that's probably going to be coming into this. I'm going to try to remove that as much as possible when doing this. I know I've talked about Fate Zero is absolutely, it's always in contention with Dragon Ball Z for my number one of all time. It's at the very least my top two. Kiritsugu Emiya being a big proprietor of why it's number one, because he's definitely one of my favorite characters in anime, period. But first of all, let's break down Kiritsugu Emiya. Specifically Fate Zero. Now, of course, Fate is a franchise that spans many a different show, but for this one, we are specifically sticking with Fate Zero. And also, another thing for this battle, we will be taking the absolute best versions at the exact moment where they're definitely at their best. So, for Kiritsugu Emiya, the point where he's at his absolute best and strongest in terms of all of his overall abilities would be right before his final battle with Kirei at the end of Fate Zero. By the time we meet Kiritsugu in Fate Zero, he is a middle-aged man who has been through a lot already in his life. With a rough upbringing, having to not only literally kill his father, he also had to kill his own mother figure. Kiritsugu, he's an assassin, he's a mercenary, he's known as the Mage Killer. He's very proficient with guns and all manner of assassination, whether it be blowing up a jetliner or stabbing someone in the back, shooting them from long range, you name it, Kiritsugu has it all. Or almost all. Throughout the events of Fate Zero, we see many of Kiritsugu's special skills come into play. First of which being, not only is he a very skilled assassin, he is a pretty powerful mage. Not the most powerful in the show, in Fate obviously, but he does have notable abilities. As well as I mentioned before, he's very proficient when it comes to guns in any manner. His two go-to guns being a Thompson Center Contender, as well as his Calico. But also throughout the show, we see him handling long-range sniper rifles, RPGs, different manners of pistols, knives, grenades. When it comes to weapons and, of course, assassination, Kiritsugu is a master in the class, as well as having a very cold and get-it-done demeanor. He does not think even for a second when it comes to killing somebody. It's just if they need to be killed, he will do it. Throughout the events of Fate Zero, Kiritsugu has the goal of when he enters the Grail War, that when he gets the Grail, he will wish for a world without war. And that is his driving goal throughout the whole show and getting until the end. And Kiritsugu has the mentality of needs of the many over needs of the few. When faced with the dilemma of killing a boat that has 200 people versus killing a boat that has 300 people, he without hesitation picks the boat with 200 people. And there are many amazing cases throughout as we get towards the end of Fate Zero where that ideology of his is challenged, and even to the point where it absolutely breaks his psyche, to where he finally realizes if he truly wants a world without war, then all of humanity has to die. And And of course, he's not going to pick that option, which ultimately is what breaks him at the end of Fate. But that's ideology and all that. We're here to break down the fisticuffs. Kiritsugu, as I've talked about, he has a wide variety of skills when it comes to guns and whatnot, but when it comes to his physical ability, outside of his physical abilities, he does have magical powers, or magecraft, as it is known as in Fate Zero. Some of which being, he of course uses his magic to enhance his physical abilities in combat, as well as his ability to sense his opponent, not from long range, but from pretty close away. But his most powerful ability, and one that definitely makes him a foe to be reckoned with when you're up against him, is his Time Alter ability. Kiritsugu's Time Alter is an ability that allows him to change pretty much his inner clock to reflect the outward world. In Fate terms, he turns his own body into a reality marble, which a reality marble is a projection of, it's pretty much just a big projection of one's mind and whatnot in a current scenario. It's similar to a domain expansion in Jujutsu Kaisen for a more mainstream comparison. Kiritsugu in the show shows that he's able to bump his Time Alter to 2 times, 3 times, and then all the way up to 4 times in his battle against Kirei, though it puts immense strain on his body. And during his battle with Canis towards the beginning of Fate Zero, it is shown that he can also use the ability to stop his own heartbeat to avoid being detected. This is known as his stagnating. And of course, since I specified that this is the Kiritsugu right before his battle with Kirei, he also has access to Avalon, which in Fate, it is the scabbard of King Arthur. And in Fate specifically, it is granted to the master of King Arthur, Artoria Pendragon, or specifically something that Artoria Pendragon can gift to whoever she wishes, and the scabbard is sort of absorbed into their body. And when that is done, the owner of Avalon can heal from any injury, which proves very beneficial to Kiritsugu in his battle with Kirei, as when Kirei delivers a finishing blow right to Kiritsugu's chest that explodes his heart, he almost immediately recovers and heals from that wound. However, Avalon will not save the user if, say, their head is removed or brain is destroyed. But anything else, fair game. Now, when it comes to Kiritsugu's combat ability, his only real downsides, when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, he is slightly lacking. His specialty absolutely is weapon and long-range combat. It is shown multiple times throughout his battles in Fate Zero that he will often be the one fleeing to gain either higher ground or longer distance to then shoot back. He always tries to avoid hand-to-hand combat at all costs because he knows that he's not the best. The time, however, when he is forced into hand-to-hand combat is during his battle with Kirei, which then is also shown because Kirei is quite the beast when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. That battle being a perfect example of facing your own worst enemy, and this will come into effect later. The only reason Kiritsugu won his battle with Kirei was because that he kept overwhelming him, having to push his Time Alter up to 4 times, and he just kept overwhelming him with multiple glancing blows, and even in the end, though Kirei was down an arm, he still had the greater advantage when it came to hand-to-hand combat. So at the end of the day, Kiritsugu Emiya, proficient in everything that comes to weapons, hand-to-hand combat, unfortunately is lacking. When it comes to intellect and planning, he is a master strategist. It shows to how he was able to be one of the last masters standing, and ultimately would have been the winner of the Holy Grail War if other events did not take place. It was shown many a time that throughout the war that even his own servant was wary of him, and often they would butt heads because Saber, being someone very strong and honorable and being very chivalry bound, and Kiritsugu being a very dirty fighter. Well, just even the case, just like he just wants to get this shit done. He doesn't care about honor or anything. There's no place for that on the battlefield. Now then, moving on to Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop. When you're introduced to Spike in Cowboy Bebop, he's a very happy-go-lucky, but unfortunately Spike does have quite the dark backstory. Being betrayed by his lover and best friend, Spike seeks out the world of bounty hunting, hoping to one day reunite with that lover as well as get his revenge on his former best friend. Throughout the many events of Cowboy Bebop, we are shown many spectacular cases of Spike being very proficient in hand-to-hand combat. One of his most signature moves being the flying spin kick. Though he may be one a very skinny, almost frail-like frame, he has quite the power behind each of his blows. Though Spike may not be the wittiest or even best with his money and often very starved man, he very easily is able to turn off the happy-go-lucky and go into gunslinger serious mode, being able to shoot with a pistol into the tightest of crevices to hit his target. Also, a pretty cool crossover moment was when Spike also was wielding a Thompson Center contender. Some of Spike's weaknesses, however, do end up being if he's up against someone who wields blades. Whenever he gets nicked, he gets cut a lot, and that obviously hinders his ability to use his gun, which he is very proficient in, using a hand pistol. Of course, outside all of that, he is a very excellent pilot in his swordfish ship, and he's a very fast man, very easily able to duck into cover, jump around, find any way to escape the situation that he's in. Unfortunately, though, at the end of the series, though he was able to defeat his rival and former ally, he ultimately met his end because of the multiple wounds that were dealt to him over the course of the battle. I would say a weakness of Spike is that he's definitely someone physically that you can break down slowly, just as long as you hit the right parts on him. At the end of the day, Spike Spiegel, he's very good at hand-to-hand combat, pretty deadly with a handgun, very great as a pilot, though at long range, he's not the best. He either has to be right up close to you or just within handgun range. So now that we have those breakdowns out of the way, let's get into the scenario. Now, of course, the fun part of this cross-battle thing is coming up with a scenario that would take place to get these two characters to have this battle. Obviously, this wouldn't necessarily make sense because Fate Zero takes place in the mid-90s, whereas Cowboy Bebop takes place in the far-off future. And obviously, in the Cowboy Bebop world, Earth has long since been post-apocalypsified. For the sake of it, I will just put Kiritsugu from the Fate world into the Cowboy Bebop world for a bit. Now then, on with this scenario. I'd say the best way for them to interact would have to be that Spike is maybe offered this bounty for a mage killer named Kiritsugu Emiya, and it is fetching a very high price since he is a very wanted man. He's killed a lot of high-valued people. Of course, this catches Spike's attention, and naturally, he would jump at the opportunity to take this challenge. Eventually, when the time comes and they become face-to-face with one another, I imagine they would have quite the interesting exchange of dialogue, because even though both of them are very similar in their look, Spike and Kiritsugu definitely have very different emotions. I could see just Kiritsugu just standing there with just the blank stoic look, whereas Spike is definitely shooting him some quippy one-liners and whatnot. You ever heard of bell peppers and beef? It would definitely start similarly to a Western standoff, and then as soon as a little stone drops in the corner, they draw. Kiritsugu, of course, would open using his calico, going rapid fire, but in response to that, Spike would not be able to fire a shot in return because, rapid fire versus single shot. Spike would be the first one to have to duck to cover as he maybe fires a couple shots. They would both end up having to duck behind cover and then take a quick breath. Kiritsugu checks his ammo, and Spike takes a couple breaths before he looks around seeing if he could get an advantageous high ground. As soon as he looks back to check if Kiritsugu's still in his spot, he's already gone. And then suddenly bullets rain from above. Kiritsugu has already taken the high ground. Spike is forced to fall back even more. Kiritsugu is playing it smart. He's making sure to keep Spike at a distance. Unfortunately, Spike does have the upper hand in this situation because the bounty, of course, lists Kiritsugu's specialties and just what he's wanted for. The fact that he's armed and dangerous. Whereas Kiritsugu doesn't know anything about Spike. But obviously, of course, Kiritsugu is going to play it safe and making sure to keep his opponent at a distance. Spike would eventually, through many trial and tribulation, like using many things as cover, throwing things, trying to create a smoke screen. Spike has taken a couple scrapes because when he threw up the smoke screen, Kiritsugu would have had to fire a little blindly into the smoke, but what he did end up nicking Spike a little bit. Spike, taking note of his injuries, he pulls the pin on a grenade and chucks it up the stairs. However, Kiritsugu is quick to this and he kicks it right back down. However, it doesn't go all the way out, and right before it explodes, Kiritsugu does a quick time alter. Time alter, double XL. He quickly jumps out of the window and makes it down onto the bottom level. Spike is quick to duck behind a table, but he's hit with a little bit of shrapnel on his back. So right now, Spike is looking the worse for wear. He's gotten hit with a couple cuts, couple little glancing blows, but nothing too fatal just yet, whereas Kiritsugu, still perfectly fine. For the most part. He has had to use a double XL. He takes stock of his calico ammo and notices that he's almost out. As he goes to ready his next magazine, Spike snipes the calico out of Kiritsugu's hand. With Kiritsugu having no weapon in his hand, he is forced to retreat. Spike suddenly has the upper hand, as not only does he have his pistol, but he has a broken table which he took and is using as a sort of shield. Avalon quickly heals the bullet wound on Kiritsugu's hand, and unfortunately he's lost his calico, so he then has to switch to his Thompson contender, which, by the way, if you don't know, a Thompson counter contender is a one bullet, one shot, and then you immediately have to reload that bullet. He has to make every shot count. At the very least, he needs to create enough distance to maybe regain his calico, but Spike is making sure to keep close eye on that weapon as well, as he is slowly inching his way towards it. Kiritsugu takes note of the angle that he has and quickly does a quick swipe, fires his first shot from his contender. One thing I did forget to mention, the bullets that Kiritsugu has in his contender aren't normal bullets. They are cursed bullets. Bullets that have his powdered ribs inside of them. Don't ask me for context, just watch the show. But pretty much anything that they come in contact with that's magic will corrupt the magic and sort of just like rebound on them. Now I get that obviously Spike has no magic, but still the bullet's gonna pack an extra punch. The bullet goes straight through Spike's shield and right into his left shoulder. Spike, very stumbled by this, almost falls on his back, but he fires shots of his own right back to make sure that Kiritsugu stays back. Spike takes cover behind the building, and the fight once again is at a standstill. Kiritsugu quickly reloads his contender. He has another bullet ready to go. Spike takes note of the ammo he has left. He only has half a mag left. And with his left shoulder out, he's already looking rough. Kiritsugu decides to take a ballsy, risky move. Since he knows Spike is still going to be recoiling from that shot, he goes for his contender, opting to go for a time alter Triple XL, giving himself the speed he needs to get to the Calico and then get to Spike. He's able to regain his Calico, and in the time that he's still in the time alter, reload it as well. All of a sudden, he's right next to Spike. Spike barely had time to blink before he looked to his right and saw the eyes of Kiritsugu. Kiritsugu aims his Calico and opens rapid fire on Spike. Still in Triple XL, by the way. By this point, Spike has been left completely out in the open. He has been caught completely off guard by Kiritsugu. All he can really do is just try to cover himself the best he can and return fire. Spike gets riddled with Calico bullets, but Spike is able to land another shot on Kiritsugu, and though it only grazes his cheek, Avalon heals that immediately. Spike, being absolutely just shot, falls on his back. Kiritsugu, though being a cold individual, is not one who's short of mercy, and he honestly has respect for Spike. Because Spike isn't necessarily evil in his eyes, he's just looking to get a quick score. Just unfortunately, he picked the wrong man to go for. Kiritsugu gives him the option to give his last words as he readies his contender, and of course Spike would have returned something quippy with a smile on his face. Anyone ever tell you should smile more? Kiritsugu would have asked for his name, Spike of course being like, named Spike. As Kiritsugu readies his contender, Spike, slowly reaching for his pistol off to the side, quickly draws. Bang! Both of them fire at once. Kiritsugu landing his shot directly in Spike's head, and Spike hitting Kiritsugu right in the chest. Kiritsugu falls on his back, dropping his contender. Is it a draw? It would be, if not for Avalon. Kiritsugu is on his back for a few moments, but quickly Avalon kicks in, and he comes to, a little bit of blood running down his face. He takes note of the bullet hole in his clothes, and he looks to Spike, who died with a smile on his face. Kiritsugu would have returned a little smirk to him. Kiritsugu collects his weapons, and simply just walks off, thinking that if it weren't for Avalon, that fight would have been a draw. And that was this cross battle. No matter what I do, someone's gonna be mad, but at the end of the day, Kiritsugu ultimately would have the upper hand. I could have easily thrown in that maybe they had a hand-to-hand fight, but it would have been decided at that point. If it came down to hand-to-hand combat, Spike would have won. But Kiritsugu, being a very smart individual, always makes sure to keep his opponents at range. And Spike, of course, was doing his best to close the range, because that's where he's most effective. Ultimately, though, at the end of the day, it did come down to Avalon having to heal Kiritsugu's wounds. Of course, that can come down as like, is that cheating? I'm doing these where both opponents are at their absolute best ability. I mean, the same thing happened in his fight with Kirei. It's like Kirei exploded Kiritsugu's heart, but then he immediately got back up because Avalon healed his wounds. So it ultimately came down to who was the smarter fighter. Spike gave it his absolute best, but at the end of the day, Kiritsugu would win this cross battle. Now, I'm sure you could do a thing where it's just like, okay, how about you bring Kiritsugu down to Spike's level? Get rid of all the mage craft, get rid of everything, just have him just be like as he is when he was younger. Ultimately, though, I would say it would be the same result, though in the end, it would be a draw. If Spike was able to just lift his gun just a little bit higher and shoot Kiritsugu in the head as well, then the fight would have been a draw. But ultimately, that was this cross battle. Thank you all for joining me on this. Let me know any interesting cross battle ideas you may have. I definitely will be doing more of these in the future because this is pretty fun to break down and just, come up with a scenario. So thank you for joining me on this. I'm Lancer. Thanks for watching.